Welcome to the Diabetes Nerd Podcast. I am your host, Ginger Vieira. I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 25 years, since 1999, whichever one of those holds true by the time you're listening to this. And with me today is Julia Flaherty, as I like to say, but it's really just Flaherty, right? That's the
Yep.
same. Yeah, but it's a lot more fun to say Flaherty.
Yeah, I like the way that you say it.
Good. For like a couple years, I only knew your face as someone who messaged with me on LinkedIn, and you
Yeah.
just assumed, I think largely because of your lipstick and just
Oh,
like, and your name, I assumed you were British. I just,
I remember you telling me that.
yeah. And you just looked so polite and like put together, which
Oh,
you are, right? You're very polite. And
yeah.
but that's really the Midwestern in you.
Right.
Not
I was gonna say that's Midwestern politeness,
Yeah,
but
probably more polite than a
I'm
Brit.
happy to be mistaken as a British
It
person.
was so funny to me when I actually met you in real life, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's American." It was funny.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So tell everybody, about your pancreas and how it doesn't work very well.
Yeah, it doesn't work at all.
Doesn't do anything.
I've
Yeah.
been living with type 1 diabetes for over 21 years, which is just crazy to say. I was making an Instagram reel this morning and converting the amount of years that I've lived with it into days, and I'm like, holy crap, how have I made it this long?
Hmm.
It just
Yeah.
feels like an impossible disease to manage sometimes, and like the fact that there are so many of us waking up out there doing it every day is a feat. It's not easy, and it just makes the fact that it's been called the invisible disease even more hilarious.
Right. Because it's not at all invisible for
No,
us. It's like constant. And if you live
right.
with us, like, yeah, I mean, you see it. You're like, I don't go anywhere without this thing, right? And if you look at my
Right.
skin, like my husband will be like, you should stop injecting your long acting right there because I abuse these two sides of my
I
hips, right,
know.
where I can easily reach, and they're bruises.
Well, you run out of spots too.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but there's just some areas of my body that don't absorb insulin as well as other parts. So, of course, I'm going to keep going back to those areas. So,
Yeah, and areas too, like I do not give injections in my thighs because it always bleeds and it just feels wrong and I don't know why. And I used to have really lean thighs and now I've got plenty of fat there too and it doesn't matter. Like it
yeah.
makes no difference. But then I also, when I was younger, I used to do most of my injections in my stomach. And then after
Yeah.
having babies, I've had two C-sections, and then I had to have my ab muscles basically sewn back together. And
Wow.
so the skin on my entire torso, like they cut me from basically hip bone to hip bone, pulled up all the skin on my torso so they could
Oh,
sew
no.
my ab muscles back together. And so all that skin on my stomach was like really sensitive and felt weird for a long time. I just started injecting insulin on the sides of my torso recently because I want
Hmm.
to branch out to some new skin and give the areas I've been abusing on my hips a break. It's
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my
it's a
gosh.
lot.
It it is. I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't do it in my thighs anymore
Mm.
either. I don't know why. I'm not a doctor, and I don't know why it doesn't absorb as well for me there, but I usually am just like in my stomach or in my hip.
Do you use your arms? No?
No, I don't. I tried that when I was probably in my early 20s and teens just because I didn't want to be running to the bathroom all the time and having to, pull up my shirt to take my shot. I had a lot of like
Mm.
self-consciousness around that, so injecting in the arm was a lot easier.
But you
Yeah, I
don't
just don't do
today.
that anymore. I find it painful.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's how I feel about my legs. It's always painful. I inject in my arms a
Mhm.
lot. And if I'm being really lazy or like I'm stuck in a winter coat kind of thing, I'll inject
Mhm.
right into my shoulder muscle, which does hurt, but it's like it's just the only place I can reach and it's like, ugh, I just want to get this in and I can move on.
I
Yeah.
actually didn't even know you could do that.
I mean, you shouldn't inject right into muscle because it absorbs really quickly, but some people do it on
Mm.
purpose for correcting highs because like
Okay.
insulin is designed, what they tell you about the timing of insulin is based on you injecting it into body fat. So if you inject it into
That
muscle,
makes sense.
it wasn't designed for that. The directions on how quickly it's going to work no longer apply because muscle is going to absorb it
Mm,
faster. I met a guy, he was the
love that.
CEO actually of D Life, which I don't know,
Oh,
some people
yeah.
have never even heard of it. I don't think it exists anymore. And
Okay.
he would inject,
Sounds
he'd
familiar.
had type 1 forever, and he would inject right into his forearm when he was high
Mm.
to correct really fast. And I tried it a couple times and it
Ooh.
kind of like made a little bubble. It was it was not good. And that it just felt super weird. But I don't like that. So
Yeah, I can't imagine
speaking
that
of the
feeling.
body, this is actually a good intro into the
Yeah.
topic that we want to talk about.
Yeah.
You and I first met when we were both writers for Beyond Type 1 many years ago.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you wrote an article about body image and diabetes that was just so personal and so real. And I think you were you in your teens or 20s as you were in that story? When did that start for you? When did that become like a,
Yeah. I definitely felt called to share that story, just thinking about other teenage girls that might be going through the same thing as me. And I know that it's not just restricted to teenage girls or women across all age spans that navigate body shame and stigma. But when I was in the thick of it, I was probably in my junior year of high school, so
okay.
17.
Yep. Take us back. What do you remember? What was going on?
Yeah, so like most people after they're diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and around the time of their diagnosis, I had lost a lot of weight. I was probably the skinniest that I had ever been,
Yeah.
and I was pretty skinny in my middle school years, freshman year, sophomore year, and puberty hit me a little later than other girls around me. And when it hit me very hard. So I was responding to food very differently,
You already
exercise.
had type 1 by this point?
Yeah, I was diagnosed at 10 years old. So
Yeah.
from like 10 years old, so that would be fourth grade. So
Yeah.
fifth grade, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th, I was still pretty lean. I was skinny, just because of how I was handling my diabetes. I had a lot of fear around eating certain foods, so I followed a pretty restrictive diet to manage
Mm,
my blood sugar levels. I didn't know a lot about how to incorporate the foods you love, etc.
yeah.
So, being a teenager is hard for everyone, but I think when you're managing a chronic illness and when you feel like you're the only one, um, you don't have a lot of resources or information around you to navigate that experience. And I felt just so embarrassed that I had gained weight. I'd probably gained 10 pounds. And it was just, I felt how differently people were treating me.
No.
And I think that that's an experience that a lot of women have when they gain weight. And I
Yeah, at
didn't
any
like
age.
how,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't like how it felt. So I just remember, I remember watching Pretty Little Liars and Hannah. I don't know if you've ever watched the show,
No.
but there was a character named Hannah, and she was also going through like body shame and stigma. Her character had lost a lot of, her character was heavier, and this was the story they gave her in the series, that she was heavier and then she had lost weight and she was only eating like a few almonds per day.
Oh.
So I thought,
Oh no.
I'm really embarrassed to say this, but I thought, oh, if I just do that and eat a few almonds and I don't take my insulin, I'm gonna lose weight. And I knew it was wrong. I was never dumb about managing diabetes. I think what was really happening was that I was burnt out with
Yeah.
diabetes for the first time in my life, and I didn't have a word for it and didn't know how to talk
And no
about it.
community. Like there was no diabetes community back
No,
then. This is early
no.
2000 or this is
Oh, it was
10.
God, must have been like 2014
Okay.
when I was a junior in high school. No, 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 no. Earlier than that. It
No,
was
yeah, because you're
2011.
okay.
2011.
Right, you're a few years younger than me.
2011 when I was a junior in high school. No, there wasn't. I was still using probably Instant Messenger, AIM,
Yeah.
and Facebook had recently come out, and
Yeah.
parents didn't want you on it because it was being promoted as a dating app
Oh,
back then. So it was, yeah, it was really strange.
yeah.
There wasn't a way to connect with anyone. There were local like diabetes organizations with chapters, etc., but it didn't
Yeah, there were
feel
some
like,
blogs back then, and that was, but there wasn't really communities necessarily.
yeah, it didn't feel like a place where you could just go and open up and say like, "Hey, I'm going through this. Have you ever gone
Yeah.
through it?" And I don't think I would have been open to that at the
Yeah.
time because I
Well,
didn't
and
want to
what we
talk
have
about it.
today, like you could go find people who are talking about this on their Instagram, and it's very
Oh,
personal and it's
absolutely.
very real,
Mhm.
right? And so
Yeah.
you don't have that. Okay, so you stopped taking all insulin back then?
Yeah, I think it was just 1 week of my junior year where I either severely limited or didn't take any insulin because I thought that was the answer to
Mm,
losing weight.
yeah. How'd that feel?
Awful.
Yeah.
Awful. And what ended up happening was that I was taking a speech class and it was my turn to give a speech and I almost fainted in front of the room. I had to stop in the middle of my speech and say, I think I'm going to throw up. And I ran to the bathroom. The whole class was shocked. They thought that it was a part of my speech. They
Oh,
had no idea what was going on. And I've always been a person to like brave through all the hardships, don't talk about it, like keep going. So I somehow pulled myself out of that dark period. I'm just really like sad when I reflect on that. Like why did I ever have to go through that, you know?
1 week though. I'm glad that that was just 1 week for you because for many people it ends up
No.
being years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I gained a lot of weight after my diagnosis. So I was diagnosed at 13 and I
Mhm.
didn't, nobody talked about it. And I was very skin, I was just normal. Like I was a normal 13-year-old body weight. And then I
Yeah.
got skinny at my diagnosis, of course. And then over the course of,
Yeah.
I don't remember the weight gain being quick. It was more like over the course of high school. I didn't feel like I was eating differently than my peers. And
Mhm.
I just felt so much bigger than them. And it's a thing that is not talked about and it's becoming a little more talked about, especially with parents who are like really good at advocating for their teenagers. Because I've
Yeah.
heard from quite a few parents who are getting their teenagers on GLP-1 meds or metformin to help counter the mega insulin resistance that comes with puberty. And then when
Yeah.
you have that as a teenager, right, as a teenager with type 1, it's like we're taking this suboptimal form of insulin. We're overproducing glucose, which nobody talks about either. And then,
Yeah.
right? And so the normal weight gain for a non diabetic teenager is like doubled and tripled, I feel like, and this is me pulling numbers out of thin air, but
Yeah.
it's a common challenge because I've heard from the parents and it should be addressed with something like metformin or GLP-1 meds to help counter that insulin resistance because we have to take such large amounts of insulin to deal with puberty and it does lead to weight gain and then can lead to really dangerous ways of trying to cope with the weight gain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wish that those medications were more accepted among the type 1 diabetes community in general. I don't know a lot about them myself,
Yeah,
but that's
even
because
today,
like
right?
they're not marketed to us. We're not getting information about that.
Yeah. We could do an episode and all about it and if you
Yeah.
ask all the questions I could explain it and because it's life changing. But
Hmm.
on another note,
Right.
so what you moved through that, but when like what were you left with after that? Okay, the almonds and skipping insulin isn't the perfect fix. So now what?
Yeah, I just remember during that period, eventually going into my endocrinology visit, which had to have been right around the same time, and my blood sugar levels were very high, and I got yelled at about getting them
Mm,
down. And I'm Midwest polite. I'm Midwest nice. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, you know. So I was like, well, I better get my act together. I don't want my parents to be disappointed in me. I don't want my endocrinologist to be disappointed in me. So I was like, I guess I'll take my insulin, and now I have to figure out another way.
Okay. So if we fast forward today, you and I have talked a lot about just how much type 1 like totally messes up your relationship with food. And I know I've had to work through it in my 20s of like identifying it. I was
Yeah.
stress eating basically was my kind of
Mm.
form of that. It was like whenever I was feeling stressed out and maybe like out of control, right? Or things were happening that were beyond my control, which is happens
Yeah.
to anyone. It's just like just life, right?
Hmm.
Part of my stress I think was feeling like what's happening or what's going to happen or whatever.
Hmm.
I would go and get foods that were kind of off limits for diabetes and celiac, right? So I
Mm.
Chinese food and chocolate glazed donuts that came in
Yeah.
a white box with a red label. I think it was Duncan Hines or something. For me, that was like it was like rebelling against the rules,
Hmm.
and I don't know. It was total comfort stress eating, but it was self-destructive too, right? I didn't know how to
Yeah.
manage my blood sugars around that. I didn't have a CGM. I didn't understand the delay of Chinese food, yada, yada, yada. Like I was completely winging it and struggling. Did you go through, what was your relationship with food like when you were struggling the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I totally relate to the feeling of like, oh, just screw it all. I want to rebel against the foods that are considered diabetes friendly and just figure out how to incorporate these other foods. I just remember that I was told I shouldn't eat sugar, and I was going to like birthday parties where the parents were very well intentioned, but they would give me sugar-free jello or
Oh,
angel food cake, and I would cry about that because I just wanted to be like the other kids and
yeah,
be normal.
yeah,
And angel food cake, like looking back, that's hilarious because it has sugar in it, and
yeah. It's
it's
like
not a
pure
great
starch.
alternative.
No,
Right, it's not a great alternative to
no.
regular
I
birthday
remember
cake.
that too, being told Jello and angel food cake. We definitely had
Yeah,
similar, yeah.
I don't
Well,
know why that was a
what year were
thing, but
you
it was
diagnosed?
consistent. 2004.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because of our age difference. All right. So I guess between 1999 and 2004, not much had changed there.
No,
Yeah.
no, I guess not. I just think that I was really scared when they said, don't eat sugar, avoid it. Only eat apples if you want to satisfy your sweet tooth. And I was committed to that for a while. I was
Oh,
only eating apples when I wanted something sweet, and I was like, well, this is
wow.
my life now. And I remember then in when I finally got into high school, so it had been like several years from, when I was diagnosed as a fourth grader to finally being a ninth grader and getting friends and going out with them. And,
Mm.
they were, I remember just being really excited that older kids wanted to be my friend, and we would go to Perkins after like musical theater practice, and like some people would be getting fries or pie from the bakery stand, and they were like, "Oh, Julia, you're so skinny, you can eat anything," and I was like, "Really?" Like no one had ever told me.
Oh,
But they didn't know anything about
yeah.
diabetes, and
Yeah.
I wasn't really vocal about it back then. I didn't
No.
really want to talk about it. I just wanted to fit in and
Yeah.
be like everyone else. So I remember that I thought I'd be naughty one time and get an ice cream sundae while we were all out together. And I just saw that, oh, I could figure out a way and my body could handle it. And I think from there, my relationship with food shifted. But I went through a period of overcorrection after not being able to incorporate the foods that I liked or figuring out how to for so long.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So now today, like, like I know for me, it was a certain point in in my fitness endeavors where I joined this gym,
Yeah.
right? And everybody at the gym were mostly, oh, my echo's going off. It's reminding me to take my long acting afternoon. I take
Oh.
30% of my long acting dose at 2:30, and it's made
Oh,
such a
nice.
difference. I'm going to do it right now so I don't, I'll forget later.
No, don't.
So everybody in this gym was counting carbs because they were watching their macros for their bodybuilding
Yeah.
efforts.
Hmm.
And I'm going to inject into some less abused skin here with my long acting dose. And they were all, it was like, whoa, it was so weird to me to see people tracking their carb count. And the whole, if it fits your macros thing didn't exist yet. That whole, like, ketogenic was just getting going
Yeah.
early on. But it shifted my perception of having to think about what I eat. And it became like this fun thing that was fueling my
Oh,
athletic goals instead
yeah.
of a burden that comes with type 1. And it changed my whole mindset.
That's a nice reframe.
It was like an amazing, unexpected thing. And what it did for that whole rebellion thing was I just like this. I just remember I don't know, I'm sure it was gradual, but I remember it being pretty clear as day to me one day of like, you know what? I don't need to label any of these foods off limits. Like,
Yeah.
I can
Hmm.
choose to eat any of these foods. I can choose to eat whatever I want. I can choose to eat Chinese food and donuts every day if I want. They're
Yeah.
not, no one's holding me back from this. They don't need to be this forbidden thing. But I
No.
can also choose to eat foods that maybe feel a little better, right? And it doesn't,
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
love Chinese food. I don't mean to say I've never eaten Chinese food or gluten. I
Yeah.
have definitely cheated on gluten since then, but it's
Hmm.
not in this rebellion like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Right. It's out
it's
of
a
like
thoughtful
support for your mental
decision.
health. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's just, and I'm owning the decision instead of an impulsive, like, response to an emotion. It's just like, I want Chinese food tonight, and we're gonna get it. I'm gonna get the thing I love, and I'm gonna dose insulin carefully as possible. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? When was that
Yeah.
shift for you, and what did it look like?
Oh, wow. When was that shift for me? Ooh.
How would you describe your relationship with food today? What gives you more peace?
Hmm. Hmm. That's a good question. I think that right now I believe that all foods can be incorporated into a good life with diabetes. I think I'm going through a lot of insulin resistance. I know I'm not moving as much as I want to, so I want to figure out how to make my schedule work for me a little better. But, until I figure that out, I have to give myself grace. And I think that having a little bit of the thing that I want always feels better than telling myself, oh, I can't have this, whatever. Um, there's this great gluten-free bakery near my house that I love getting a treat from every now and then. And I'm going to let myself have that on the weekend if I want it. I don't want to live a life that's completely devoid of the joys that food can bring you. I think when you're too restrictive or too free with your nutrition, you're probably not as content holistically as when you can find that nice balance. So for me, the balance looks like, hey, if I have a little craving, I'm going to satisfy it because if I have the thing that I think is going to be better for me, I'm still going to want the other one.
Yeah, you just become obsessed. The restriction,
Hmm.
I know it works for a few people. There's some people for whom
Yeah,
that works well for. But
yeah,
like for most people that I interact with, the restriction drives obsession.
yeah.
And the
That's what
obsession is
happens
not
to me.
sustainable. Yeah.
Yep. Hmm.
And when I did try to eat really low carb, I remember one, I would like Google pictures of cake just and look at them because
Hmm.
I was eating really low carb, right? And I was Googling pictures of cake. And then when I decided I was done with it, part of what like was a driver for me was like, I want to eat an apple or strawberry, let alone chocolate cake, and not feel like I'm doing something wrong. Like I don't want to be on a diet where
Yeah, and
eating
that's
an
what it
apple
is.
is wrong.
Yeah, it sucks to have that voice in the back of your head like you're being naughty. You
Yeah,
shouldn't
because you're
eat that
eating
every time
fruit.
you reach for the
Yeah,
food that we weren't told was diabetes friendly.
yeah. And I had that from diabetes education, and then also the extreme bodybuilder people, right? Where they were like, at first it was really helpful to see them counting carbs, and then it became like
Yeah.
obsessive and controlling. And I was like, I don't
Mhm.
want either of this. I want to choose, and I get to choose, and I figure out what works for me and balance. And what works for me is going to be different than what works for you, but both of us
Absolutely.
have found that a place of peace where like you don't feel
Yeah.
controlled by food.
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
think it's such a fine line between what you just mentioned of it feeling really good and knowledgeable to count carbs to realizing that it can actually hurt you if you're thinking about it too much.
Yeah, and also this idea that you're only a good diabetic if you are restricting carbs, right? And
Yeah.
obsessively counting.
Hmm.
Because that's definitely a message that's out there. I used to have some people from a super restrictive Facebook group that anytime I posted anything on my Instagram about eating even an orange, I would get a little comments from them of, well, you know what would fix that? Not eating oranges. Like,
Oh
go
my gosh.
somewhere else. Like, why? If you want to sit in your platform and preach zero carb and ketogenic, that's great. But don't come into my room, right? My
Right.
house and start telling me that I can't eat orange. It's just silly. So yeah, for people listening, like it's okay. Also, I mean I I believe firmly that it's actually better for our health and our mental health.
Yeah, just don't judge other people's diets and what works for them. You're not living in their body and they're not
Yeah.
living in yours.
Yeah. And instead of trying to adopt someone else's diet, go experiment, figure out what works for you and what helps you feel at peace, really. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's
Oh,
like eating all the
absolutely.
carbs is not going to help me feel at peace. Eating zero
Yeah.
carbs isn't going to help me feel at peace. It's this middle ground that I have to shape for myself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Julia, tell everybody where they can find you because you have a lot of content that you have a newsletter that is so sweet and insightful, and it's just like it's like comfort food for the soul. How can they find you?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, you can read my blog, Chronically Climbing, at heyitsjuliaflaherty.com. I publish a new blog post every Monday. It covers different topics related to navigating life with chronic illness, from career to wellness to personal stories from my own experience that I hope make you feel a little more connected out there.
Your recent blog that it was, I forget the one line that really made me laugh. It was like a job promotion. It was correlating type
Oh,
1.
my full-time job started in the fourth
Yeah.
grade. The
Yes.
retirement line.
Yeah, there was no retirement package. Yeah,
Hmm.
that cracked me up. All right, Julia, thank you. I appreciate you and yeah, keep putting the good stuff out there.
Likewise, thanks for having me.